Well, guys, I guess we have to open the cans.
I guess so.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Cheers.
Cheers.
To the moon.
Cheers.
Obi, talk us
the
through
moon.
your first sip of beer.
Yeah, that's the first in a decade. So that's what it tastes like. Actually, I think it might be over 21 years ago.
Really?
So yeah, since I've had a beer, even a sip of a beer. I don't think I've had a full beer.
You're trolling us with that number, right?
Everything's 21 for me.
Oh, cool.
Everything's 21 for me.
I knew it. All right, well, we're going to do away with the intros. Troy Cross, people know who you are. Obi, people know who you are. Let's get talking about what's going on in the mining space. We were at one of the meetings today with the electric company here in Madeira, which was a very interesting meeting. We'll get into our thoughts about that. But first of all, Troy, I want to ask you about your next 12 months, because you made a pretty big decision. So why don't you tell the plebs what's going on in your life?
Yeah, I did make a big decision. I took a unpaid leave from my college, basically diving into the Bitcoin space full time. And I don't know exactly what that looks like, but I'm here, I'm in. And so far, that means the Bitcoin Policy Institute, where I'm a fellow, writing articles, informing lawmakers and journalists and the general public, especially on the topic of Bitcoin mining. But you know how it is, as a Bitcoiner, you end up thinking about everything. Bitcoin Policy Institute is kind of a base for me. It's an educational institute. I'm familiar with that, comfortable with that. But I'm also advising a number of companies in the mining space, and I'm looking to make an idea real. It was an idea that got me into this space about a year ago. And yeah, I had like 2 followers on Twitter a year ago. I had this idea about how to hold Bitcoin in a carbon neutral way, just through mining. No shitcoins, no shenanigans, no carbon credits, no ESG, just mining Bitcoin in a way that expressed your own values, which is something that I think kind of Bitcoiners have long done. We own the mining network, it's ours. And mining in a way you want, it's a free and open network. You can do it. I realized that just doing that, you could hold Bitcoin in a carbon neutral way. People hadn't figured this out. And I also was just like blown away by work that I read by Nick Carter, Lynn Alden, and others in the energy space, convincing me that quite apart from this idea, Bitcoin was really great for the environment, and that, or could be great, I should say. It's kind of a mixed bag, but it's headed in this direction of being really positive. And the fundamental underlying principle of sound money is really important for a sustainable human future. So yeah, those kind of realizations brought me into this space. I built up a bunch of Twitter followers. I don't know what I have now, something like 12,000. It's a lot according to some points of view, and according to others, it's nothing. But it was enough for me to get enough attention for this idea and get on various podcasts. Thank you for having me on earlier. We had a wonderful conversation. That I feel like I just have to make a go of it. I think Bitcoin is the most important thing I could do with my life right now. For the last year, I've been doing 2 full-time jobs. I'm teaching philosophy by day, doing Bitcoin by night. And there's day Troy and night Troy. And night Troy has been where all of my energy and hope and ambitions and values and emotions lie. And I'm just like, all right, day Troy, you're done. I mean, there's not enough room, first of all, to sustain both lives. I don't have the energy to do it. But also, this thing is far, far more important in creating a better future for humanity. I think that we can make a difference in the world. And that's kind of jargon that I've heard my entire life, but never really fully believed it until now, because I didn't really see a way that I could have a massive impact in the world, but I kind of do now. And so it just feel irresponsible for me not to pursue this thing with 100% of my energy. It's the most important thing I could do with my life. So I'm thankful to have a wife who's very understanding, and I decided to just do it, even at my age.
I was going to ask you about that before we come to Obi, because the plebs listening to this, how long have you been a PhD professor?
Oh my God. Let's see. I mean, over, yeah, I'm 51. My first job was maybe I was 30.
Right.
So yeah, 21 years. 21.
There you go.
But of course I'm studying philosophy before that. I've been studying philosophy since I was 20. So it's 31 years of study in this field. And I have tenure. Tenure means basically it's very hard to fire me.
You can't be fired.
And my income just keeps creeping up. And I love my college. I love my job, right? So it's pretty sweet.
But this is a big deal for you to have taken that leave of absence for 1 year, and you obviously had to make a big decision there. Philosophically, come to align with that, which is obviously your speciality. But you got a wife and you got some kids in the mix.
Yeah.
Like, how did you approach that subject with them?
Like I said, I'm just so grateful to have married the person I've married. She's amazing. She's seen the transformation in me.
Right.
You know, Bitcoin changes us.
Yeah.
And she's seen the way that it made me more hopeful and positive and productive, right? Fiat is a depressing place to live. So there's what like really lights you up. And I think she likes the lit up me better than the non-lit up me. And yeah, that's what's at the bottom of it ultimately. And she's been nothing but encouraging. And I have to say, one other great thing about my wife is, some maybe people listening know this, but I had a great number of Bitcoin at one time. And I'm not rich. I'm not able to launch on this journey because I have this excess of wealth. I don't. It's actually dangerous. But she's also never given me a hard time about selling Bitcoin that I had in 2011, or most famously spent on a lot of socks, where I actually bought her 5 Bitcoin each. Alpaca socks, which I have a couple dozen pairs of, right? I still have this drawer full of socks. And
what's the worth of that sock drawer right now?
Well, at 20 grand a Bitcoin, that's basically 100 grand per pair, so 2 dozen. Okay, you can do the math. 2 dozen pairs. So that's just the socks, but I spent on lots of other things because I wanted to use it as a medium of exchange and build a circular economy, right? But the kind of woman that never gives you a hard time about that is also the kind of woman who will support you on a venture like this. Yeah.
Does she have a sister? I'm still in the market. I'm looking.
Obi, let's bring it across, because you shocked us all about just under a year ago, where you announced CoinFloor was being sold. CoinFloor, the longest running, correct me if I'm wrong, the longest running Bitcoin exchange in the UK.
Yes, at the time.
Right. All of a sudden you're out of the game, and none of us saw that coming, and you went to ground for a little while, but bam, here you are, you're back again. You're supposed to be sunning yourself on the beach, taking things easy. What's going on?
I should be.
But I thought I was out, but they pulled me back in.
First thing, Night Troy and Day Troy, it sounds like some sort of superhero. I just envision Bitcoin man, I don't know, but Bitcoin is addictive. The ability to have a chance of being part of the story of changing the world, you have to do it. And the ability to impact so many lives with the skills that I've been fortunate enough to have. I tried. I'm in a fortunate position. And so I tried to say, like, I'm going to take 1, 2, 3 years out. But within a few months of selling, I was talking about a open source project that I'm very excited about at Bitcoin Miami. And a few months later, I was at the Oslo Freedom Forum, meeting some incredible people, which also changed me again, because it made me realize that it's even more important when you see people who are fighting for freedom in the physical world, in a physical way, and realize that they are starting to come to the conclusion that the technology that you love and you are passionate about actually can help them. And they are working very hard to do that. You feel that you have to commit yourself even harder. And that's actually, at that point I realized I can never leave this. So yeah, but last year, a year ago, I realized that something had happened when I set up, or was one of the co-founders for CoinFloor in 2013. This was in the shadow of Mt. Gox, and we wanted to bring trust to the space, whatever that meant. And I felt that our mission was to help people escape from regulated money, fiat, to this free money, Bitcoin. And so I saw myself almost like this sort of Robin Hood / jailbreaker. But over a period of 8 years, without realizing, I went from being the jailbreaker to the jailkeeper. And that was not a good look. That was not what I wanted to do. And I think in the early part of last year, I came to that realization. And at that point, I realized I needed to move on to something else. Now, after I've sold it, and luckily the UK business has gone on to Coin Corner, which is, again, one of the few exchanges that's sort of dedicated to Bitcoin as well. I am able to focus on what I'm really passionate about, which for me is all Bitcoin. And for me, I call it the all global South, but it doesn't necessarily need to be in the South. It's more about people who are oppressed or who are under the yoke of dictators or authoritarian rule or just disadvantaged by the world. So all global South and all at global scale. So I don't want to just focus on one country. I want to focus on things that can help everybody, everywhere, as quickly as possible.
All right, should we talk about some mining?
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Let's go there. Troy, let's kick it across to you. Why mining?
Well, what's the function of mining?
No, why mining for you?
Oh,
why did you
drew me to
grab
mining?
on to that part of Bitcoin
Yeah.
specifically?
Well, I think it's because it's so misunderstood. I mean, of course, all of Bitcoin is misunderstood. It's a very counterintuitive thing. Satoshi says this. It's a bloody hard thing to explain because there's nothing like it. This educational task that we're all involved in is challenging, but mining especially, and even starting with the name, it sounds like you're extracting something, when in fact, it's just a kind of math puzzle that you solve. But I myself stopped mining in 2011, largely out of concern for energy consumption. I did some math, back of the envelope sort of math calculation back then, when there was a 50 Bitcoin per block reward for the winning miner. And when we were mining on graphics cards, and I just looked at if Bitcoin's total market cap were equal to gold, which was the fantasy back then, at the given block reward, how much energy would be used, and then given the current mix of energy, how much emissions would come from that. And it just didn't make any sense at all. It seemed like it would use all of the world's energy, which is what the World Economic Forum and Newsweek said in 2017. Like, I was basically there in 2011. And I came to see my own misunderstanding, right, of what mining was. And I see mining now as utterly different. I mean, first of all, I understand the halving and the pace of Bitcoin adoption, and that the energy budget of mining, I think, will be roughly the same or grow slightly if we develop a fee market or sink slightly if we don't develop a fee market. Most people don't realize that, but I also realize its flexibility and uniqueness as a buyer of power. It pays for power. Fundamentally, what mining is a transformation of electrical energy into money. And I say transformation because you don't sell energy for money, you literally turn it into money by winning a block and getting a block reward from every node in the network. Every node in the network recognizes the block that gives you an award as a legitimate block. So that's a literal transformation. It doesn't require a buyer. And as this kind of buyer of energy, Bitcoin mining is unique in a number of ways. It's location agnostic. It doesn't depend on where it is. It's time agnostic. It's scalable. It can happen at a large size or at a small size. And it taps into a global market with a fungible good. Bitcoin's the same everywhere in the world. So it's wildly transformative of the energy system itself, because essentially it puts a floor under energy. Wherever there's cheap energy in the world, whether that's through subsidy or it's just naturally easily available, Bitcoin mining is going to go there and suck it up before it uses energy anywhere else. It's incredibly price sensitive. And then you realize, like, okay, you start spinning out the ramifications and it's massive. It means we're going to develop energy resources where we haven't developed them yet because they're stranded away from users. You know, energy is like the opposite of fungible. Its price is highly dependent on where it is. But with Bitcoin, its Bitcoin price is essentially the same wherever it is. So we'll see resources and finances flow to underdeveloped energy resources. Also, I think the cheapest energy is renewable already in terms of new energy, and at a price of at a rate of 15% improvement every year in solar energy. I think very soon solar is going to undercut every other source in terms of its price per unit of energy. And we'll see Bitcoin mining flock to the cheapest energy, which will be solar, and accelerate the build out of solar and the deployment of solar, helping to scale solar, which in turn, bringing that scale will drive the prices down faster than they otherwise would. And there's a lot more besides. Bitcoin mining helps the grid operate more efficiently by balancing the load. But this is all too much to go into in a short podcast. I just want to say it blew my mind in all the ways in which it changes the economics of energy development, the scene for renewables, and really the build out of electrical infrastructure worldwide. All of those things kind of surprised and amazed me once I got into them, dealing with basically turning waste into money. Energy that's very low price is now basically waste, whether that's waste methane from a byproduct of oil mining, or whether it's waste methane from trash landfills or farming or wastewater treatment facilities, or whether it's tires that have been disposed of, or whether it's waste product from coal development that happened 150 years ago. In all of these places, Bitcoin is going in and monetizing what was otherwise simply waste. And so it's this extraordinary engine of efficiency and acceleration of an energy economy, none of which I appreciated and none of which is yet appreciated by the world.
Yeah, 100%. So Obi, let's talk about some of the projects that you're involved in Africa. So some actual boots on the ground. This is working. This isn't a dream, because we were in the meeting today and we'll talk about that afterwards. It's very hard for people actually to grasp what we're talking about.
Yeah. So I have the benefit of being in the space and working in it from the point of view of helping people go from fiat to Bitcoin and vice versa for a number of years. And as such, I spend a lot of time reading about Bitcoin, understanding it, and enough to know that I'm going to have a lifetime of continued education. But mining always struck me as one of the, especially when I'm very interested in equalities of opportunities, it is theoretically closest, I think, to the potential of a purely meritocratic way of earning money. It doesn't matter where you are in the world, and it doesn't matter who you are, what background you are. All that matters is, you know, the color of your hash, as it were, and to use. And also, we want to try and make Bitcoin mining as decentralized as possible. But it's also something that you can provide anywhere in the world, and then you're helping the entire world when you provide it. It's instantly global. So something that I was always really keen to do was to be able to set up Bitcoin mining in Africa. Then I had the fortune of listening to Troy and the idea of, if we're using renewables, we can effectively compensate for the footprint of the amount of Bitcoin that we own and have. And so this actually redoubled my focus on this. So recently, I was introduced by Alex Gladstein to someone who was working on a Bitcoin mining startup in based in Kenya, but they're focused. They look to expand across Eastern Africa eventually. And I invested in them. I also I'm fortunate enough to know a number of long-time Bitcoin miners who've been mining as early as 2010. And they now have very large operations, but they are still geeks. So even though they have these multi-hundred megawatt installations, they still mine with their friends at sort of small mines of 10 to 20 megawatts, and they also mine in the back of their house. So they understand it, and they maintain their technical bent, and they have worked with me to help ensure that this operation in Kenya has the best chance of being efficiently run and governed. They also have Bitcoin mining charities which can donate mining rigs. So although this intends to be a profitable business, to get it kick-started, they are donating mining rigs towards it. Now, this operation partners with a number of small to medium-sized energy producers, all renewables, because that's actually the easiest source of energy to find in Africa, renewable sources. So the first set of companies that they partner with are hydro. They use hydro energy. And so they partner with these energy producers, and they have a problem. Partly bureaucracy, just partly the way things works, but it can take, at the best, 3 years, but on average 5 to 6 years before you construct an energy production plant, a hydro plant, and then it takes that long to get a contract with the government to be able to sell it to them. Now, when you sell it to the government, you probably can make more money than you can make from mining, but you have to wait 4 years or 5 years with this after this large capex spend. So along comes Bitcoin. Bitcoin can be deposited near to these plants and start producing an income, making them generate revenue from day one. And it also means that you can generate those profits and reinvest into growing faster. At the point that they get this contract, if they get this contract in the future, it's movable. So we can move the mining power to somewhere else. And once you explain this opportunity, it's a game changer. Mm-hmm. In fact, people go from struggling and figuring out how they're going to survive for 5 years to figuring out how they're going to expand. This is a complete 180. So that's why it was exciting. It was incredible for the environment because it's using renewables which would have had no other use otherwise. It's critical social because you're adding to the local economies in East Africa, and it's incredible for governance because you're getting best practice governance in the most efficient manner that's being shared. So
bring on the
when
ESG
I saw the
ratings.
opportunity, I would very much like to see the ESG argument against this. I would very much like to see it, but I was incredibly fortunate to invest, and my partners from Houston, from Texas, are also looking to take a position as well, and we will want to just expand in a sustainable way.
Awesome. Well, here we are.
Can I just add something to this?
Please do.
I mean, when I read the number of people who do not have electricity just on the continent of Africa, it's 800 million people. 800 million people do not have access to electricity, and the most common fuel sources for these people are
paraffin.
Yeah, paraffin, diesel.
Diesel.
Charcoal. It's a step function change in life when you get electricity. But when you introduce electricity to a population that does not have electricity, there's no off-taker because they don't have appliances. They don't have a lifestyle that's built around electricity. So there's tremendous capital risk in introducing something like that, particularly solar microgrids, but hydro development. There's capital risk in making that investment, and so there's a big delay in the improvement of not just the lives, but the economies of a vast number of people. And then you see Bitcoin mining do exactly what Obi's doing. And then what I would like is for ordinary Bitcoin holders to take a very small percentage, like 0.5% to 1% of their Bitcoin holdings, and buy hash rate from the producers that are mining Bitcoin in the way that reflects their own ambitions for the network, what they would like to see the network be like. I would love to see the acceleration of electrifying the global south. And I would like my Bitcoin to be a part of that. You know? Then that, if you did that, and the reason I say that percentage is because the ratio of Bitcoin's market cap to the amount of Bitcoin is very large. Like, I don't know how much Bitcoin's worth right now at 20,000, but it's something like 600, it's less than 600 billion, but something in that 500-600 billion range. The total revenues from mining right now, we know from the block reward, it's less than $1 billion a month. Right? It's under that threshold. So maybe it's $10 billion this year. That's the total revenue. Right? So to mine the same percentage of all mining as you hold of all Bitcoin requires a very small investment. So I'd like, my idea developed with Andrew Bailey to sync up with real people who are selling or producing Bitcoin out of electricity, and have ordinary, plebs and investors, or or ETFs, ETPs, just devote a small percentage to making this dream a reality. I mean, it will happen regardless, because Bitcoin's going to find that cheapest power, and this will be cheap power, but we can accelerate it by deliberately mining in the way we want to mine, on a voluntary basis.
Yeah. And not everybody has the opportunity to buy a share in a mining company, but they can potentially use a vehicle like that. And you will know that if you take power from organizations like the one I'm fortunate to be invested in, that it's all renewable. There is no other option. And it's all social, and it's all well governed.
Yeah, going back to the very first question you asked, like, once I had this vision of, like, wait a minute, we could electrify the global south, we could green the Bitcoin network over time, we could accelerate the development of solar and other technologies. I mean, it's not, I say solar because I think it's doing very well, but the great thing about the market is we don't really know.
Right.
It'll find the cheapest power. It will find a way. And it's like, once you see this, it's like, well, how could I do anything else with my time?
We were there today in that meeting with the electricity board here in Madeira. That was a crazy meeting.
It was the craziest one we've had.
That was a crazy meeting.
It was wild.
It was wild. And just to set the scene, there's a bunch of Bitcoiners here that are going around these different government organizations trying to help with the education project that Andre is putting together here. So we roll into the meeting. I think they matched us man for man almost with the amount of people they brought into the meeting themselves. They just kept coming.
They brought the A-team,
Yeah. So that, I was really bullish to see so many people on deck. It's not like we just had the one old dude sitting there, but that obviously fragmented because there was a lot of different ideas in there. I just want to get a feeling of how did you feel the meeting went today?
Well, despite the fact that it was somewhat chaotic, I actually thought the meeting was great. I thought the chaos actually loosened up the room. People started saying what they actually knew or felt, realized they didn't know that much about Bitcoin, some of them. And but they were very gracious and open, and we actually also learned a lot, because this grid is highly regulated. It is, this whole power system is very special. It's not just an island, we knew that going in, meaning they cannot use interconnection to deal with their imbalance between supply and demand. They can't just send some excess power to another grid. They can't just get excess power from another grid. It's all here. But it's also that their prices are regulated and matched to the mainland, and that the EU in a way subsidizes this island's power. But also that, not only does the EU subsidize the power here, but the company here owns some wind facilities and not others. And any power they buy from the grid that they're not producing themselves, they have to pay ordinary rates for. So the mining situation here is very tricky. And we sort of learned that from them. From us, I think they learned that Bitcoin mining is flexible. It's a ideal form of demand response. We got to inform them that you could actually turn it off in 5 seconds. They were like, do you mean you could call us up and tell us you can turn off in 5 minutes? We're like, no, it's 5 seconds. It's so much better than you realize, right? So I thought it was actually, despite being somewhat chaotic, loose and open. I was really impressed with the amount of openness to learning that was in that room. They didn't have their minds made up. They were willing to learn. And I'm actually bullish on where we go from here. I think we can set up a small pilot study behind the meter at a wind farm. I think they would be quite open to that. We could publish that study and make it a model for other places. So I thought it was actually great.
Yeah, I mean, I think you covered almost everything. Well, everything though. I think for me, what was really interesting was that I noticed at some point we talked about that Bitcoin was the ultimate consumer, and I think also they valued the stories I said about the experience in Kenya as well. And what I saw was at one point, after a series of questions and answers by us, a realization that what they thought Bitcoin mining was not what it was. And once they started to do that, that's when the conversation started to break up and loosen, because they were having to reassess everything. It's not this sort of energy guzzling monstrosity, but actually it's a tool, a very, very powerful tool to add to their toolbox for managing their energy grid. And the more they ask questions, the more they realize that, you know what, we still need to do some more research. It's not settled, but at least the positioning of Bitcoin mining in their mind, I believe, switched. And for me, that's a success. If once people start thinking about it the same way, in a different way, then everything else starts to flow.
The thing that sat with me was that, and I found this in a few of the meetings that we've been doing, when we go in there, we're received very graciously, but we sometimes forget that they're still in like the fiat legacy mindset.
Totally.
They think we're like Bitcoin TM or something.
Yeah.
Yep.
And we're just coming in to shill our product. Yeah. And that was evident. Andre caught that today at the very beginning of about 10 minutes into the meeting. He's like, whoa, hang on a second. We are not a Bitcoin mining company. We are not Team Bitcoin. No. We're not here to sell you we're not shilling you anything. We're offering you our expertise. We had you there. We had.
It's a win. It's a win-win.
Right, and then that kind of started shifting in a couple of guys' minds. You could see, right. What do you mean you're not here to sell us something? This never happens. Right?
Actually, I think I commented on that point at one point, which was to say that we believe that, and we know that Bitcoin has been much maligned and misunderstood. And just like the fact that the world isn't perfectly meritocratic actually does a disfavor for everybody on the planet, because you don't have the best people doing what they need to do. A misunderstanding like that does the planet a disservice, because that means we're not able to accelerate our plans for renewable adoption around the world. And so we know that if we can get people to understand that, the world benefits. And that was our objective. It's a very holistic objective, which is we're trying to make people understand that Bitcoin is actually not the problem, but an essential part of the solution. And once it's understood, everybody's life gets better. And so when they had that aha moment that this was actually a tool to help them accelerate their plans, for me, that was success, because everything else starts to follow from there once the positioning in your mind changes.
Yeah, I think, I was very grateful to Andre for kind of clarifying that. In fact, this whole visit, we've been received very graciously and with open minds and open hearts, and that's been incredibly encouraging. The island is an experiment in a number of respects. It's an experiment in renewables. This power is somewhat expensive here, but it actually would be much more expensive if it were not subsidized. And that will, the European Union would like for this to be a laboratory and a demonstration of the role of renewables in an islanded grid for worldwide. They're currently at 33% renewable, but everything I'm reading online says actually 50%. It's all the press releases. But I think that they're not quite there, but actually they're aiming for 70, 80% today, we heard, for 2050, right? And these, right now, there's only 15% wind. The next greatest source of renewable was hydro, and then PV. But as PV and wind, photovoltaic, but as those two grow, the problems of balancing a islanded grid are going to get much more extreme. Only 15, 16% wind is not that hard to deal with when you have over, when 67% of your grid is thermal. You just turn up or down what they use is either diesel or natural gas, liquefied natural gas. So it's not so big, but when they start getting close to those goals, it's going to be extremely hard. Already they have pumped hydro storage where they pump water uphill and then it turns a turbine when it comes back down. They already have a large installment of batteries. But those devices will not scale at the pace they need to reach their goals, and we can actually get by with them being much smaller if we overbuild renewable capacity and pair it with Bitcoin mining. And I think they got a flash of that vision. I'm not sure if they can realize that vision because of the regulatory environment they're in, but I think they got a flash of that vision that it's cheaper and faster to overbuild renewables than to add the requisite amount of storage. Just overbuild and then fund that overbuild with Bitcoin mining. I think we got that.
With this powerful tool, yeah.
Talk a little bit about curtailment, this idea of curtailment and the overbuilding curtail, because this seems to be, from what you guys were talking about today, I was a fly on the wall in that meeting, just like watching these balls fly around. It's like, yeah, I'm loving this. What is that model? How does that work? And how does Bitcoin fix that?
Well, so much power is curtailed. You can check the statistics around the world for curtailment, and basically that just means that you're wasting power. You're putting it into it's different ways of doing it. But one way is dumping power into basically a load bank, which is glorified hair dryers. It just turns electricity into heat. Another,
so you're just grounding the energy.
Yeah, you're just grounding the energy, right? You got to get rid of it somehow. The grid has to be balanced at every moment. Supply and demand must match. If you have too much, more than the grid needs, it has to go somewhere. And yeah, it can just go into the ground and get wasted, but it can't be on the grid. And then if you want to build a grid that is renewable, you have to provide for those times when the wind is light and when the sun is not shining. And you have to be prepared for basically lots of variations in weather and variations in your input, but you still have to meet the grid's demand. And so it's very tricky to do this. One way is with gas peaker plants. You just fire them up when needed, and they are basically balancing your load. But as that renewable penetration gets higher and higher, you start curtailing more and more power. You have producing more power than you need. And that's just, curtail is another word for just wasting or dumping into the ground. And Bitcoin mining, basically we have so much waste in the electrical system of the world as a whole. I like to think of, in the end, parking Bitcoin miners wherever these excess is in the grid, because you can scale it to size. So you kind of monitor how much excess do we have and how often. And then you size a Bitcoin miner installation, you put it right there, locate it where that excess is. And it just soaks up. It's like a hairdryer that makes money. It's like, instead of turning in just heat, you turn it into heat, but you solve some math problems along the way. And then some of those might, you get lottery tickets basically for your hair. It's a hairdryer that produces lottery tickets. And then imagine all around the world that excess energy being soaked up instead of just being put into the ground, being soaked up by Bitcoin mining. And it's headed that way anyway, because it's cost sensitive, and waste energy is by definition cheap, and cheap energy is by definition waste.
So it's inevitable.
So it's inevitable. it's going to do this eventually.
So for an island to get ahead of this, to see this opportunity, what could it mean to a small island like this and the inhabitants here?
But I'll add before I answer that is that it's a hairdryer that turns heat energy into money, but it also protects people around the world. Yeah. It helps fund bulletproof jackets for people in Ukraine. It helps Canadian truckers be able to continue to protest peacefully. It helps people in Togo with the colonial franc, people in Venezuela who are suffering from 20,000% inflation. So it's doing incredible good while also making you more profitable. And that's really important to remember. And we try to stress that point as well when we talk to
the hairdryer. That's also a highway. It's also
it's also a humanitarian infrastructure. So this is why we spend all the time working on this. But what does it mean? Well, I don't know. A year ago, I came to Madeira. A friend of mine decided there was lockdown all across Europe. A friend of mine decided to come over and to check it out. And after a day, he messaged me to say, you should definitely come over now. And without even having never been to Madeira before, I just came I just booked a ticket and left 2 days later. I was going to stay for 2 weeks, and I spent 4 months here. And I literally had to be dragged onto the plane to leave, because it's an incredible island. And I ended up, it solidified my decision to become a resident of Portugal as a whole, and consider in the long term becoming a citizen. But it's still a tough choice, and coming back here, it's become a tough choice between Lisbon, where I currently am, and Madeira. If I have a startup, which is going to be announced in the coming weeks and months, and I'm hoping for it to become a very significant company. And if I knew that there was an ecosystem of Bitcoiners here, then I would be moving here. I would be hiring and recruiting people here, adding my knowledge and experience, what little that is, to the local economy. And if Lisbon is anything to go by, I will be attracting other people or brainwashing them, and you don't have to do it. You don't have to do too much. You just have to get them to come and spend, my measure is 2.5 weeks. Mm-hmm. If you spend 2.5 weeks in Madeira, that's it. Right. So you just say, hey, just come over, spend 3 weeks. And that's all. And then they will bring along their ideas, their energy, and employment as well. So the potential for a country of 250 to 260,000 people is immense.
Any further thoughts on that?
No, that was just beautifully said, although I don't think you need 2.5 weeks, because I've been here 4 days?
2.5 days in.
Yeah, I'm already...
Yeah, I'm being conservative.
You're being very conservative in that judgment. No, it's a beautiful island. It's colored by the fact that I'm with a group of Bitcoiners that I feel really blessed to spend time with. But I think even apart from that, it's an extraordinary place. I hope others discover it.
Well, we've reached our time, guys. Appreciate everything that both of you are doing in the space. Obi, I think you've even got through that beer, man.
I think I might have to start drinking beer again. This is the real revelation for today. Is that what this whole thing was set up to get me to start drinking beer again?
All right, cheers, brother. Thank you.
Have a good one, mate.
Guys. Cheers.
Cheers.